If you know it, sing along with me, okay? You can put your hands together with me like this. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, 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 freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And me, for I'll be a slave. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. I said, no more weeping. No more weeping. No more weeping over me. And me, for I'll be a slave. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. I said they'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing over me. And me, for I'll be a slave. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
My name is Bob Meisel. I'm proud to be president of the temple and today's MC. The Brotherhood, Sisterhood, and Social Action Committee of Temple Emanu-El are sponsors of this tribute and are grateful for the co-sponsorship of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee. So who exactly are we honoring today? Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist, one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. An African-American church leader and the son of early civil rights activist and minister Martin Luther King Sr., King advanced civil rights for people of color in the United States through nonviolence and civil disobedience. Inspired by his Christian beliefs and the nonviolent activism of Mahatma Gandhi, he led targeted, nonviolent resistance against Jim Crow laws and other forms of discrimination. In 1964, King won the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolent resistance. In 1968, Dr. King was planning a national occupation of Washington, D.C. to be called the Poor People's Campaign when he was assassinated on April 4th in Memphis, Tennessee. His death was followed by national mourning. While today's event is paying tribute to Dr. King, it's also being held in memory of two particular tragedies which demonstrate the hatred and bigotry that Dr. King so nobly fought. On June 17, 2015, a mass shooting occurred in Charleston, South Carolina, in which 9 African Americans were killed during a Bible study at the Emanu-El African Methodist Episcopal Church. Among those people killed was the senior pastor, State Senator Clementa C. Pinckney. This church is one of the oldest black churches in the United States, and it has long been a center for organizing events related to civil rights. On October 27, 2018, an anti-Semitic attack took place at the Tree of Life Synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh during Shabbat services. The perpetrator killed 11 people and wounded 6, including several Holocaust survivors. It was the deadliest attack ever on the Jewish community in the United States. Both of these attacks resulted from bigotry and hatred. As I think about these events and the work of Dr. King, I'm reminded of the speech that Robert Kennedy gave in Indianapolis immediately following the news of Dr. King's assassination. And I quote, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who will still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. We can do well in this country. We've had difficult times in the past, and we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence, it's not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings that abide in our land." Unquote. Today's tribute includes inspiring words from Temple Emanu-El's Associate Rabbi Michael Sheffrin, reenactment of Dr. King's speeches and commentary by Reverend Charles McKenzie, poetic recitation by Lynetta Gaines, remarks from Lindsay Mintz of the Federation, and music from the Soul Sensations and the Light of the World Men's Ensemble. Michael Sheffrin joined Temple Emanu-El in July 2016 and serves as our Associate Rabbi. His warmth, intelligence, energy, and sense of caring have been a wonderful addition to our temple. In addition, Rabbi Sheffrin is currently president of the Sarasota Manatee Rabbinical Association, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Community Day School, and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Sarasota Ministerial Association. It is my privilege to introduce Rabbi Michael Sheffrin.
Shalom Aleichem. The response to that is Aleichem Shalom. Let's try it again. Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem Shalom.
Peace be upon you, and may peace be upon all of us. We read in our Psalms the words Hine Matov Umanayim, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Behold, how good it is for brothers and sisters to sit together. It is a pleasure and a distinct privilege to welcome you to this meaningful and significant event, to share together in this important moment of fellowship. I want to welcome you here to our sanctuary with members of our temple family, members of the greater Sarasota Manatee community, leaders, event planners, greeters, gift shop proprietresses. It takes a village, and here we are. Being together today is good, and it is right. I want to give a message quickly to our temple members who are here. I'm proud of you for continuing to support this event for, 10 years now? Is this our 10th? Don Malowski? 7th, 10th, somewhere in there. That we took a hiatus because there was this pandemic thing. Choosing to open our doors and continue to support this important work is good, and it is right. And to our holy guests who are not members here, I want to tell you that you are welcome. You are welcome here today. You are always welcome when our doors are open, especially on Friday nights at 7:15 if you'd like to come pray with us. Come and share in our worship. Today we take our place, once again, in the important history of the Jewish and Black communities coming together, as we have for generations. And I pray that that never stops. We come here today to remember and to celebrate. We come here today to say names of heroes and sheroes, and to build bridges. We come here today to be entertained and to reflect. And of course, we come here in tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Decades ago, Dr. King's good friend, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, introduced Dr. King, who was speaking to a group of community leaders in the Jewish community and rabbis. He introduced him with these words. Where in America do we hear a voice like the voice of the prophets of Israel? Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King is a sign that God has not forsaken the United States of America. Heschel declared, God has sent him to us. His presence is the hope of America. As we recall his memory today, as we bring Dr. King's good works to the front of our minds, let us all feel that presence here in this sanctuary. Let us all feel it here in this fellowship. Let us feel it here with your neighbors, the holy souls sitting next to you, in front of you, and behind you. Take a moment real quick. Just look around. Who do you know? And more importantly, who don't you know? Make it a point later when we conclude. Make it a point to make a new friend today. Walk away with someone's phone number. Rabbi Heschel's description of Dr. King rings true, in that the hope of America still exists. I'd like to begin and invocate this moment with a prayer of gratitude in the way that Jewish people pray. Friends, if you know it, please join in. Shehechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, God, who has enabled us, who has sustained us, who has given us life, so that we may come here together at this moment in history, in this special place, with these people. And together let us say, Amen. Thank you, friends. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Lynetta Gaines. She is a historian and an educator, national and international consultant. She has worked with students of all ages and faculty and administration across the board. She's the founder of a community preschool in Atlanta and Education Arts Incorporated in Louisville. She's a dancer. She's an actress, a performer extraordinaire, and a published children's book author. Hooray! She's beloved in this community, and we're happy to welcome her here back to our sanctuary and back onto our bima with a poem that she has prepared for us today. Dr. Gaines.
Thank you, Rabbi Sheffrin, and thank you to all of you for coming today in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. Almost 2 years ago, as we watched the inauguration of President Joe Biden, many of us beamed with pride as we listened to a young African-American poet reading a poem that she had written for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always justice. And yet, the dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it. Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe, now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in thy heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. God's on our side. God is on our side. God is on our side today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Whoa, we shall overcome someday. Oh, say, we shall overcome someday. Oh, yesterday, a man said to me, he said, how can you smile when your world is crumbling down? I said, here's my secret. And it came to me, he said, I'm taking a look around, and I know that I'm getting by, and I hold on, change is coming, hold on, don't worry about a thing, hold on, you can make it, hold on, don't worry about a thing. Some people like to worry, some people like to hide, some people like to run away when the pain inside. Now it's your business. Do whatever you want to do, but if it don't work out, here's what you ought to do. Say now hold on, change is coming, hold on, say don't worry about a thing, hold on, you can make it, hold on, everything will be alright. Hold on, and you can make it. Hold on, don't worry about a thing. Help me say, hold on, you can make it, Hold on, everything will be alright. La 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 say hold on. I opened my mouth to the Lord and and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be.
Oh, who's that yonder dressed in red?
To see what the end's gonna be.
Well, it looks like the children that Moses led.
To see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. I open my mouth to the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end's gonna be. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. The big wheel runs by faith, and the little wheel runs by the grace of God. They see the wheel in the middle of the air, way up in the middle of the air. The big wheel runs by faith, and the little one runs by the grace of God. See the wheel in the middle of the wheel, way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel way in the middle of the air. 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 Thank you.
Reverend Charles McKenzie is an ordained minister, a full-time public school teacher in Manatee County. He's been involved in the political landscape, promoting civil rights for minorities, women, farm workers, and the youth. Reverend McKenzie has participated in all of the MLK tributes at Temple Emanu-El. When he does his reenactment of Dr. King's speech, I invite you to sit back and close your eyes. You will believe you're actually there. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Mackenzie.
Very seldom, if ever, in the history of the world has a socio-political document expressed in such profound, eloquent, and unequivocal language the dignity and worth of human personality. For the American dream reminds us that every man is an heir of a legacy of dignity. It reminds us that there are certain basic rights which are neither conferred by nor derived from the state. In order to understand them, it is necessary to go back behind the dim mist of eternity. They are God-given. Yet ever since the founding fathers of our nation dreamed this dream, America has been, to use the big word that the psychiatrists and the psychologists use, a schizophrenic personality. On the one hand, she has proudly professed the noble principles of democracy. And on the other hand, she has sadly practiced the very opposite of those principles. Indeed, slavery and segregation have always been strange paradoxes in a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal. We can hear the voice of a little Emmett Till crying from the rushing waters of the Mississippi. In doing this, America is scarring the dream. And it is trite but urgently true that if America is to remain a first-class nation, she can no longer have second-class citizens. One day, we will stand before the God of history, and we will talk in terms of things we've done. We will talk of building skyscrapers to kiss the sky. We will talk of building submarines to penetrate oceanic depths. We will talk of carving highways through the stratosphere, building planes that dwarf distance and place time in chains. But it seems that I can hear the God of the universe saying, "You did all of that, but I was hungry and you fed me not. I was naked and you clothed me not. I was devoid of a decent sanitary house to live in, and you provided no shelter for me. Therefore you cannot enter into the kingdom of greatness, but it shall be given them of whom it is prepared." And I know you're asking today, some are asking, the civil rights devotees, how long will it take? When will the radiant star of hope be plunged against the nocturnal bosom of the lonely night? How long will prejudice blind the visions of men, darken their understanding, and drive bright-eyed wisdom from her sacred throne? How long will justice be crucified and truth buried? I know you're asking today, how long will it take? Well, it will not be long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long, because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth pressed to earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth forever on the scaffold and wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long, because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. Now, I've traveled all over this nation, And I've seen the cities where the riots have occurred. And I say to America, the riot is the language of the unheard. America has failed to hear that there are people existing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. America has failed to hear the desperate cries of the least of these. And I also hear the desperate expressions of burn, baby, burn. Burn, baby, burn. Well, that's not my slogan. My slogan is build, baby, build. Organize, baby, organize. Learn, baby, learn so you can earn, baby, earn. That's my slogan. Now I want to talk about a time that we went down to Birmingham, Alabama. Had a movement there. And we met a police commissioner by the name of Eugene Bull Connor. Connor got his dogs, but he soon discovered that we had something within that dogs couldn't bite. He got his water hoses, but some of us were Baptists and we'd been immersed. Some of us were Methodists and we'd been sprinkled. And so Connor soon discovered that we had a fire burning in our souls that water couldn't put out. And so we transformed Bull into a steer, and the walls of segregation came tumbling down in Birmingham, Alabama. I hear people say all the time, you cannot legislate morality. And I agree. The law can't make a man love me. Religion and education must do that. But it can keep him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important too. So I say to you this afternoon, don't give up. Don't lose hope. God is not interested merely in the freedom of brown men, black men, and yellow men. God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race and the creation of a society where all men can live together as brothers and sisters. A doctrine of black supremacy is as dangerous as a doctrine of white supremacy. You never solve one problem of tyranny by substituting a new tyranny. And I say that we one day will realize that we're all tied together in a single garment of destiny, bound by an inescapable network of mutuality, and what affects one directly affects all indirectly. Strangely enough, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. John Donne caught this years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island entire of itself, but each man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Therefore never sin for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. One day the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, those who are poor and those who are rich, those who are shackled by the manacles of segregation and discrimination, and those who have the power to be transformative in America. One day we will understand that we have learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned how to walk like brothers and sisters on earth. One day we'll come to see that we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish together as fools. One day every man and every woman will sit under his and her own vine and fig tree, and we will beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not rise against nation, neither shall we study war anymore. On that great day, the morning stars will sing together, and all of the sons of God will shout for joy.
from there. I've heard you before. It's just outstanding every time. Thank you, Reverend Mackenzie. As you know, today's tribute is jointly sponsored by Temple Emanu-El and the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee. We're very fortunate to have Lindsay Mintz with us today. After spending 15 years leading the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council, Lindsay joined the professional team of the Federation in March of 2022 as Director of Community Engagement. She leads the organization's community relations strategy, emphasizing the fight against anti-Semitism and advocating for Israel. It's my pleasure to introduce Lindsay Mintz.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Bob introduced me, I am Lindsay Mintz, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Jewish Federation. We are proud to be among the co-sponsors for today's gathering, and I will say personally, it is really a privilege for me to be able to participate here today, and incredibly humbling to follow Dr. King's words so beautifully delivered by Reverend Mackenzie. Thank you again. At first I took your advice and I closed my eyes, and then I couldn't keep them closed. Who is this who is sharing these words which continue to resonate so powerfully? And Amanda Gorman's, I mean, just beautiful, beautiful. You know, we hear them, thank you. We hear them once, maybe. We read snippets of them, we see them in memes, or we know they're part of a school lesson, but to experience the entire delivery of that poem from 2 years ago, or any number of Dr. King's speeches and remarks from 50 and 60 years ago. And it's both inspiring and energizing, and also sometimes defeating. You know, let's acknowledge that we still need these words today. I'm really, as I said, proud and humbled to be here. It's the first time I've spoken at this gathering in this community. In my time in Indianapolis, serving in a similar role, I was very proud and grateful to serve on coalitions, on race relations network, speaking. I was an active board member of the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative, and Bob, you mentioned the April 4th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King and the role that Indianapolis played. Bobby Kennedy was giving a speech. He was on the campaign trail, and he was the first to share the news with the crowd that gathered in Indianapolis. And Indianapolis was one, possibly the only, but one of very few cities that did not devolve into a riot. And that's an interesting conversation to have today. Is that good, or was that not so good? It's something that Indianapolis has been proud of, and yet there's something there that the Black community struggles with, and we as allies stand with them in that struggle to say, what is an uprising? What is a riot? And should there have been an expression in Indianapolis in the days following Dr. King's assassination? The work that I did with the Kennedy King Memorial Initiative is some of the most proud during my tenure in Indianapolis. As was a year ago, I stood in the auditorium, the gathering room of the city of Indianapolis, where the city council met and was invited to be the keynote for the Martin Luther King annual commemoration. And that too was a very difficult moment for me. A a white Jew standing in the center of the city to acknowledge the incredible gifts and contributions and to remember Dr. King. And how do we bring our own past and our own stories or the stories of our parents or grandparents into today and still acknowledge that that's not enough what happened then. It's what happens today also that's incredibly important. American Jews are proud of the role that we played in the creation and leadership of some of the most important civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were drafted in the conference room of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism under the guidance of the Leadership Conference, which for decades was located in the RACS building. I should have mentioned also that I'm a member of Temple Emanu-El and have been a proud and active member of the Reformed Jewish movement for my whole life. So, more than half of the young people who went to Mississippi during the summer of 1964 in what became known as Freedom Summer were Jewish activists. That summer, 2 Jews, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, were murdered alongside African-American James Charney after entering Mississippi to register Black voters. Jewish leaders were arrested with Dr. King in St. Augustine, Florida, and most famously, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marched arm in arm with Dr. King in his 1965 march on Selma. Members of the Jewish community know very well that image, it's in our program today, of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel marching arm in arm. This photo hangs on the walls of rabbis and Jewish communal professionals all over the country. Dr. King and Heschel initially bonded over the prophets, as you mentioned, Rabbi Shefrin. King was drawn to Heschel's intimate knowledge of the topic, and Heschel, in turn, admired King's devotion to the Exodus story of Moses and the Israelites, adapted to the narrative of the civil rights struggle. Susanna Heschel, Rabbi Heschel's daughter, has reflected that it was Dr. King's use of the Hebrew prophets in his speeches that helped her fall in love with the Bible. She said sometimes she couldn't tell, were these Dr. King's words or the prophet's words? She said she felt like she was living in a prophetic time. When Rabbi Heschel asked how it felt when he marched with Dr. King in Selma, excuse me, he replied, "I felt my feet were praying." Well over 50 years later, we still confront our own civil rights challenges. The inequities that people of color face in the criminal justice system constitute one of the most pressing civil rights crises of our time. From protecting voting rights to criminal justice reform, we know there is still much work to be done. In Deuteronomy, we are commanded, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. The sages explained that the word tzedek is repeated, not only for emphasis, but to teach us that in our pursuit of justice, our means must be as just as our ends. We are also taught to accept others without prejudice or bias because we are all created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. So although it has been nearly 2 generations since the peak of Black-Jewish cooperation in the 1960s, I can tell you from my experience and my work that American Jews and Jews in Sarasota, Manatee are ready to honor that photo of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel marching arm in arm, not only by finding pride in sharing the role that we played together 50 years ago, but by creating new images to go in new frames to hang on the walls of the next generation of Jewish and African American civil rights leaders. As is evident today, the Jewish community is ready to show up and walk as one community with the Black community again on that long road to justice, so that our feet too will be praying. Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you very much for those words. And I actually found it great the way you were weaving together the past and the present and where we have to go in the future. So thank you for that. I would introduce the next speaker with the bio, but I've done that already. So it's my pleasure to ask back up here Rabbi Michael Sheffrin to share his thoughts.
Oh, good, the rabbi brought props. You actually have one in your hand. Before I begin my remarks in earnest, would you take a look really quickly, please, in your program? There's a photo in the bottom corner of Dr. King speaking at a lectern. Sitting next to him is Rabbi Everett Gendler. Along with those who were martyred at EAM Episcopal Church and the Tree of Life Synagogue, who we remember today, I want to ask your permission to invoke the memory of that holy soul, Rabbi Everett Gendler, who left this world this past April. He was a member of this temple and a friend to all of us, whether you knew him or not. He was a civil rights activist and a person of moral courage. He was religiously generous and overflowing with wisdom in his conversation. He gave kavod and respect to every person, and he used every opportunity to carry a message of nonviolence. Prop number one. Lindsay spoke beautifully about a photo of Rabbi Heschel and Dr. King marching in Selma. I want to show you another photo, and most of the Jews in this room, you know this photo and you know it well. This photo is from Arlington National Cemetery. You see here Rabbi Heschel. You see here Dr. King, Reverend Abernathy, Rabbi Eisendrat, Rabbi Everett Gendler. He was a student of Rabbi Heschel and someone who held regular audience with the Dalai Lama. The man was impressive. He was one of the first rabbis to become actively involved in the struggle for civil rights in our country. He led numerous prayer vigils and protests throughout the South. And he was the one who encouraged Rabbi Heschel to go to Selma, to march with Dr. King. Think about the impact of that moment, how it affected the Black community and Jewish community and the way that we can walk and work together. It's beyond measure. For the last 17 years of his life, along with his wife, Mary. And Mary is here today. Mary, could you stand for a moment? I'm so honored to call Mary my friend. She is one of my sheroes. The two of them have spent their life involved in the nonviolent struggle in the world. In fact, spent 17 years in open institutions with Tibetan exiles. That's their work they did in retirement. Right? Like, what have I done? My gosh. I want to offer today's teaching in his memory. And I want to quote Dr. King, and I'm going to say it not nearly as well as Reverend Mackenzie, who so beautifully articulated that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And I hold in my hand a gift on loan from my friend Mary, which is Rabbi Gendler's prayer shawl. So with her permission and with his permission, I'm going to wear it while I deliver these words. And I want you to notice the colors. You might look in the back of our sanctuary, you'll see some that are blue and white, or black and white, or white on white. Not Rabbi Gendler's. Some words of Torah. This week, Jews around the world in our cyclical reading of the 5 books of Moses began the book of Exodus. it is one of the greatest gifts of the Torah, is that we've given the world the story of the Exodus. For as mentioned before, it has served as an inspiration to countless marginalized people throughout history. And I stand here before it knowing that all of us feel a connection to it. Decades ago, Dr. King gave a sermon at Temple Israel of Hollywood, and he told the Exodus story. He said these words: "The children of Israel had been reduced into the bondage of physical slavery, and throughout slavery they were things to be used, not persons to be respected. Throughout slavery they were trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. They were exploited economically, dominated politically, and humiliated on every hand. But then God sent Moses to lead the children of Israel from the dark and difficult period of Egypt's slavery into a bright and better day. Moses stood up over and over again in Pharaoh's court, crying out, 'Let my people go.' Pharaoh, with a hardened heart, refused over and over again. But then came that glad day when the Red Sea opened and God's children were able to leave the darkness of Egypt and move on to the other side. But as soon as they got out of Egypt, they discovered that before they could get to the promised land, there was a difficult, trying wilderness ahead. They had to realize before they could get to the promised land that they had to face gigantic mountains and prodigious hilltops." As he spoke that day, he didn't know it, but he was speaking to us. He spoke about those who care about making the world a better place and overcoming injustice and wrong. And he spoke about how high those mountaintops are and how difficult they would be to climb. Dr. King pointed out 3 responses amongst the Israelites that are found in our text to this great challenge that lied ahead. The first group: we'd rather go back to Egypt. It's scary out there. It's going to be easier when we know what it's like. Those were not his words, I'm paraphrasing. Second, those who absolutely abhorred the idea of going back to Egypt, but were also terrified of the difficulties of moving forward, and somehow wanted to just remain stationary and complacent, accepting things as they are. And third, the folks who wanted to go on in spite of the challenges, to conquer and get over those mountains, and to ascend to those hilltops. The group that will move on and through and around the difficulties amid the trials. The ones, as he said, who yearn for the promised land. Which group are we? I believe that your walking through these doors today says that we are the third group. In every age and every generation, people have envisioned a promised land, and it looks different for each of us. For me, as a Reform rabbi, the promised land is that day when justice and brotherhood and peace and people seeing the holiness of God manifest in their neighbor is found throughout society. Can you picture it? No more hatred, no more war, no more imbalance, no more separation from another. But the promised land is really just one piece of the Exodus narrative. For, as Rabbi Myra Meskin teaches, we learn something far greater than anything about an individual or a perspective. Because what we really learn from the story, she says, is that so many of us have found connection in it because victory and freedom are achieved when the people cross the sea, when evil is defeated. She says what we really learn is that God sides with justice over power. We find that lowly slaves are seen as God's beloved children. We witness tyrants and dictators brought crashing down. And we're taught that those who are brought down by degradation and injustice are raised up and carried on eagle's wings to a place of dignity. We can look to the mountains that we must overcome. The mountains of racism, anti-Semitism, and inequality and hatred and division that we have here in America. And the horrific injustice that keeps us scared of and separated from one another. And we can look back and remind ourselves of how far we've come and know and be strengthened with the dream of our shared future. We come together to be reminded that we are not alone as we continue on our path to reach those mountaintops, to get to that promised land together. I pray that we continue to find the strength and that we continue building a world of greater justice and greater dignity for all people. I want to conclude with some words from Dr. King. He said, "I believe firmly that we will get to the promised land of collective fulfillment. I still believe that right here in America, we will reach the promised land of brotherhood. Oh, I know that there are still dark and difficult days ahead. We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome." Zecher Tzadikim Livracha. May the memory and the blessings of Rabbi Gendler, of Dr. King, of Rabbi Heschel, this is the 50th anniversary of his death this year, of all those who were slain in both our houses of worship. May they be a memory that serves as a blessing and an inspiration for each of us. Together, let us say, Amen. I'd like to invite my friend, Reverend Charles McKenzie, back to the podium for his thoughts.
Now, I know that some of you are saying, "Wait, put that apple box up there for Reverend McKenzie." And I'm going to toot my horn a little bit. You know, Dr. King was not a tall man either. So I feel like I'm in good order. I don't think that it's accidental that we are in this place today. I think that there are forces that may not be so obvious that had a lot to do with us gathering in this place today. It is especially touching to know that you have the prayer cloth and the wife of a rabbi who actually marched with Dr. King and made an impact in all of our lives, inviting Rabbi Heschel to march with Dr. King in Selma. You know, Dr. King had a Jewish lawyer. He was a smart man, right? Stanley Levison and J. Edgar Hoover threatened Dr. King and said some rather unkind things about Stanley Levison, accused him of being contrary to the American ideal, said he was a particular political orientation. He threatened him, and Dr. King said he would not be getting rid of his friend. Stanley Levison remained his lawyer till the end of his life. The Jewish and black community have a rich history together, and it goes way back. When it comes to even the movie industry, it was Jewish producers who first opened doors for blacks to participate in that arena. I think Metro-Goldwyn Mayer, is that not a Jewish mayor? Yeah, we know that's the big deal. I think that was one with the lion, right? Isn't that the one that comes up with the lion? So they opened a lot of doors. We have currents that flow together. You look at the Holocaust of Africans being brought to this country and this part of the world through the slave trade and the millions who died on the way, and then the Holocaust in Europe, where Jewish people went through the pinnacle of the crucible of what human beings are capable of doing to each other. There is a very common bond, and Dr. King often borrowed from Jewish prophets. One of his favorites was Amos, "Let judgment roll down like waters and righteousness as a mighty stream, he would often say. That's the prophet Amos talking. I'm going to say a few more things and I'll be seated. I wanted to share, and the rabbi's wife, of course, has perhaps a direct experience with Dr. King. I can only refer to things I've read, but he was in private in terms of his ecumenical attitude for people. He was the same in private as in public. In 1966, some of you might remember when, I believe it was James Meredith was shot. And he and Floyd McKissick and James Foreman and Stokely Carmichael went down to put together what they call the March Against Fear. Well, Stokely, who popularized the slogan Black Power, said, I'm not going to sing black and white together. He said, I'm not marching, I'm not singing that. And Dr. King said, well, if you don't sing that, I'm going home. And Stokely said to James Foreman, you know, if Doc leaves, we don't have no press. So we better kind of go along with it. But he was that kind of individual. The last few days of his life, he was in a hotel with Ralph Abernathy, and they ordered some fish. And the woman who brought the food up to them did not bring 2 plates. And Ralph Abernathy got a little upset and said, well, why didn't you bring 2 plates? And Doc said, Ralph, it's all right. We can eat from the same plate. I think that meant a lot to the woman because Dr. King was this all right. I met people who knew him. I met a minister years ago who was a part of his staff who said, you know, he really would give you this shirt off his back. He was that kind of individual. And I met other people who worked with him. And I had the privilege of meeting a minister, Gary Masoni, who was a part of Dr. King's staff. Yeah, Dr. King had a white preacher on his staff in Memphis the night he was assassinated. And I met Gary. He's a wonderful human being. I told him, I said, Gary, I want to get you down to Florida so they can interview you. And he's since deceased, so that never came to fruition. But he told me things about Dr. King. And he was an unpretentious man. There's stories told of him being on the phone with President Johnson. And he'd be on the phone with President Johnson, and he would put his hand over the receiver and say, bring me some more of that fried chicken over there. Very human side of him. And I think that's what endeared him to so many people. Dr. Benjamin Mays said this, President Emeritus of Morehouse College. I had a chance to be in a chapel service with Dr. Mays. I attended Morehouse in part of my undergraduate studies. He said, there are thousands of us who labor unrelentingly to be great. And every now and then someone comes along and forgets himself into immortality. I think Dr. King was one of those people. I'm going to shut down. But I have to tell this story. They were having a meeting of the Poor People's Campaign in the basement of Dexter Avenue, Baptist Church in Atlanta. And there were people there from all over the world. The press was there. And Jesse Jackson and Andrew Young, Jose Williams, and some of the others said, so where's Doc? They said, Doc is in the parking lot talking to the janitor. Doesn't he realize he has this big meeting here, all these important people here? And he finally came in, and they asked him, well, Doc, where were you? He said, well, I was out talking to Mr. So-and-so. He said, didn't you realize you had this business? He said, well, his wife was sick, and I was asking him how his wife was doing. I think that's just as important. So they had to go get him because he was out there because he had within him something that all of us have the capability of having, a kind of natural compassion and care for one another. That is the best and brightest of us. And even in these dark days, on the last night of his life, he said this, Rabbi, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. It's dark in America in many ways, but this is the time when we can shine, and as one prophet said, be light in the world. That's the great opportunity for us to be light. Black and white together, black and Jewish community together. We have too many things that tie us together to let differences tear us apart. The beautiful tapestry of history that we've woven cannot be abandoned, because this is our hour, and we're summoned in the midst of this crucible we now face to be agents of change, walking hand in hand together, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
We certainly hope you enjoyed today's tribute. How could you not? And while the tribute will end with another great musical performance, I'd like to express some thank yous before that. To start with, thank you to Brotherhood, Sisterhood, and the Social Action Committee of Temple Emanu-El for co-sponsoring this event, along with our valued co-sponsor, the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee. Thank you to all the people sitting in the sanctuary. We appreciate your being here, as well as your financial support. And there's one last thank you that needs to be expressed. Don Malowski, can you join me up here for a minute, please? Donald. As he's coming up here, for those that don't know, Temple Emanu-El has been conducting annual tributes to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. since 2015. The concept of the event, the joining of our Jewish and Black communities paying tribute to an individual who spent his life fighting discrimination, was the brainchild of Don Malowski. He's worked diligently for each and every tribute, creating varied programs with outstanding speakers and music. He's carved relationships within both communities that will endure for a long time. Don has been relentless in his efforts, and I want us to publicly thank him for all that he's done and give him a small token of our appreciation. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Randall Morgan, who will introduce our final musical numbers. And again, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. And we are so pleased to have been a part of this program today. And while the musicians are coming up to the microphones, I would just like to remind you that the Civil Rights Movement was supported by music, musicians, and writers of all faiths and colors. The Negro spirituals are timeless, and they were the favorites of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Odetta, Joan Baez, Peter Ball and Mary, Sam Cooke, and Bob Dylan, who I was introduced to when I was a freshman in college in Iowa. Bob Dylan is actually Robert Allen Zimmerman, who was born in Hibbing, Minnesota. And I think you all know the rest. But all of these individuals were part of the movement. And we are sharing their music today. So one of the most powerful and well-known of these musicians was Diana Ross. And we're going to close today with a song that, guess what? There's audience participation.
Like he said, it's going to take some audience participation. This is such a beautiful song, so much meaning, and I'm glad to share this with you all by the great Diana Ross. As you look at each other, I want you to look around and see someone here that you don't know, as he spoke so eloquently earlier. There's a lot of people I don't know, and there's a lot of things I learned today. I am really, really enlightened today, and I'm blessed to be here, and I'm grateful for that. As we go into this song, I want you to reach out and touch somebody. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, take a little time out your busy life to give encouragement to someone who's lost their way. Would I be talking to stone if I ask you to share a problem that's not your own? We can change things if we start giving. Why don't you reach out and touch somebody's hand? Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, if you see an old friend on the streets and he's down, remember his shoes can fit your feet. Just try a little kindness and you'll see it's something that comes so naturally. We can change things if we start giving. Why don't you reach out and touch somebody's hand? Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. If you can. Thank you, everyone. Let's make this world a better place.
Isn't that great?
Love it. It was awesome.
Who would have thought that?
Right. It was a great experience. It's not my first time here. Yeah. Don and I work a lot together. Don Miloski.
Yes.
Yeah. And Rabbi Sharon is going to be our speaker tomorrow at our MLK event. Yeah. So
Fantastic.
it's all coming
Keep
together.
the dream alive, right?
Yeah. Keeping it alive.
Yeah.